Welcome to Comment, Press TV's live show that gives you the chance to have your say on what's happening in the world. I'm Phil Reese, and in the next 50 minutes, I want to talk to you. It's only a debate if you join in. I'm in London, but wherever you are, we want to hear from you. And we'll call you back, so don't worry about the phone bill. And I'm not George Galloway, and he does send his regards, by the way. And he can't be with you tonight, unfortunately, but you can join me for the great debate. Call on +44 208 601 4555. You can also SMS on +44 7800 008066. Or if you prefer to email, send it to comment@presstv.co.uk. So pick up the phone, send an email. There is plenty to talk about. It's been another momentous week in this incredible year. In Yemen, tens of thousands of demonstrators took to the streets today in the country's second city, Taiz, after security forces killed at least 15 and injured many more. Can President Ali Abdullah Saleh, who has ruled for more than 3 decades, wow, can he cling on to power? What about Bahrain? With Saudi troops now in the country to support King Hamad al Khalifa, Bahrain has become a police state. There have been mass arrests. Government workers have been fired. There have been accounts of torture and the forced resignation of the editor of the nation's only independent newspaper. Well, in Libya, at least 15 rebel fighters have been killed by a NATO airstrike. It's the second such incident in recent days involving international forces deployed to protect Libyan civilians. What's your view on that? And in the Ivory Coast, French forces used helicopter gunships to target the army of Laurent Gbagbo, the now nearly toppled Ivorian leader who refused to give up power after he lost elections last November. Well, was the UN right to intervene there? Or is it just a cover for France to make another grab for its old colonies in Africa? We need your comment. I should state from the very start that any views I express in the next hour are purely my own and not those of Press TV. The show is not scripted and is broadcast live, and it's all about you voicing your thoughts. So please, call me now. There's a great deal to talk about. As you know and can see, I'm not George Galloway. I'm Phil Reese, and I've been a journalist for 30 years. I've worked much of it in the Middle East. I've covered conflicts from Afghanistan to Pakistan to South America. I've been with Hezbollah guerrillas. I've made a point of covering groups that the West call terrorists, and I would prefer to call resistance organizations. So I have a lot to say also about how the media works. And if you want to know about maybe how the presentation of certain stories is in the media, then do let me know. And I do think we now have our first caller, which is Nisa. Nisa, not sure if you're in London, I believe, nearby, and you want to talk about Bahrain. Nisa, how are you?
Oh, fine, Phil. Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you, Nisa. Yes, please.
Okay, lovely. Okay, Phil, good. Peace be on you. What I want to say was, why Muslims and people of conscience should not be surprised by atrocities committed by the Saudi army in Bahrain, including the desecration of mosques plus Quran burning. They have done this before, right in the midst of Islam's most holiest place, Haramain Sharif in Mecca, early 70s, 400 Saudi protesters butchered, and then in early 80s, 450 pilgrims murdered with the help of French snipers. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, here in the UK, the 2 million strong Muslims, please wake up and postpone your Umrah Hajj for 3 to 4 years. I said postpone. See, until this royal family, the House of Saud, the so-called custodians of the Holy Mosque, and
that's an insult, isn't it, to call them that? They've been involved in so much corruption. Yeah. I mean, some of them on gambling and in sexual misdeeds. I mean, it's a tragedy for the Islamic world that they are the guardians of the holy sites.
But these people, if they postpone until these authorities return to the pure, unadulterated teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Okay, this may just be a symbolic gesture, but it will at least save us £75 million annually, UK alone. This money can be used for our homeless, poor people in Britain and elsewhere. Charities, human rights, stop the war, Palestinian solidarity, university students. And most importantly, it will help the Lion of Scotland, also known as the commander of the voiceless, to continue fight for justice. What do you think?
Well, it's a difficult one. Thank you for that call, Nazir. I mean, obviously, it's difficult for Muslims when they have duty to do Hajj, not to turn their backs on Saudi Arabia. But certainly, I think Saudi Arabia's role in the Middle East, and remember, many in the West still use the word moderate about them, of course, because they're allies of the West, make them a country that people don't really realize the extent of the brutality and suppression there. Now, we have another call, this time from north of England, from Manchester. We have Shaukat, if I pronounced you right. Thank you for joining us, Shaukat.
Yeah, fine. Hello there, Phil.
Hello, mate.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you two questions, Phil. Okay?
Go ahead, my friend.
Well, the first question is the NATO's intervention in Libya is clearly not working. It's not protecting the people it went into for, and it's certainly not diminishing the Gaddafi's evil forces. Now, if they decide to arm the rebels and train them up and send so-called, the missionaries like what they did in Iraq and Afghanistan into Libya, it will be a bloodbath. It will be 10 times worse than Afghanistan, with over hundreds of tribes and only 5 that have got influence. And the second question I want to ask you, Phil, is if there is no end game for NATO in Libya, do you think, like I do, that they will start securing all the oil fields and the towns and leave the rest of Libya in lurch? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, some very important questions. I mean, obviously, it's your comments we want to hear, but I mean, in terms of what I think about that, look, the no-fly zone was introduced. It was introduced very stupidly because a no-fly zone doesn't achieve very much in the end. So in a sense, it had to have mission creep involved in it. Now, in terms of the oil, of course, France and Britain are very much involved in the oil there. And I think what you'll find is that they are trying to basically manage the fighting groups in the resistance. We know that Britain sent members of its security apparatus, MI6 there. The Americans are training some people. There's a lot of mysterious things going on there. So I think what the West is trying to do is try to actually manage that. But, Libya is very complicated. There are tribal divisions. Historically, when the Italians invaded in 1911, Libya was 2 countries in a way, or it was actually 3 divisions of the Ottoman Empire. So there are long-standing divisions there. But it's very complicated, and it's easier to get into a war than to get out of it. John, from the UK, is next on the line, and thank you for those comments, Shaukat. John, please do.
Hello.
Hello, John. What have you got to say, sir?
Okay, I'd like to talk about the greater picture of what is happening in the East, if I may. Get away a little bit from the details of different sort of locations, but talk about the trend, if I may. The way I see this, I see what's happening now. I see this very much as the Eastern world being in transition, that if one can make an East-West dichotomy, the West had its Renaissance soon after the Middle Ages, and one might say similar things are happening in the East, that this is the beginnings or the inceptions of the Eastern Renaissance. In the 70s, a famous German economist, Schumacher, wrote the famous book, Small is Beautiful, that shows the globe coming out of an eggshell. And the theme there was very much issues about the global village and world governance. And I think also one of the British Prime Ministers was very keen on these issues. The Tory one before Margaret Thatcher, his name escapes me.
Yeah, Edward Heath.
Edward Heath, exactly.
Oh, John Major, I think
he was very much into this. He was very worried about that, people with massive powers could make decisions. Let's say if you upset the Saudis, tomorrow they could pull out of the UK, cancel a massive several $billion contract and cause chaos and give it to somebody else. And he was saying that really this is not, these are very unstabilizing way of going about, and we need to have better systems of
Well, John, I mean, I think the point you understand about the Middle East, of course, that for centuries it's been controlled, manipulated, its leaders corrupted by the West as a means of control. So, yes, one is seeing a rebirth. One is seeing an attempt for one region of the world to take control of its destiny. I mean, no one could possibly argue that that shouldn't be the case, yet that has been the case. And I think once that happens, I think other things will evolve. Once they can control their own destiny, I think they'll have their own identity. And the leaders who are in power because of their deals with the West will find their positions under threat. And I think it may not happen overnight, but this is where the world is going. And I think for the Middle East, it will be a huge rebirth. David, I think you've got from Wolverhampton, very nice place, David. I think you've got something to say to us. How are you, David?
Hello?
I'm sorry, David, I can't quite, the line's pretty poor.
Can you hear me now?
I can now, David.
Right.
Can you turn your TV down?
Hold on, please.
It's funny, you must keep your TVs down because it gets an echo and it causes a problem with all the electronics, by the way, so remember that.
Is that better?
David, go ahead.
All right. I have some comments about Libya.
Please, we want to hear them. That's what this show's about.
Right. According to me, or according to what I'm seeing, the governments, the European governments, what they're doing, trying to stop or trying to interfere with the Libyan problem is not right, because they're doing it, to try and get their own advantages or get their own things from the interference, rather than to help the people. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, certainly, I think that the arguments over intervention in Libya, and it's complicated ones. Many people say that they're right to oppose the tyrant Gaddafi, but it's also wrong, I think, to avoid and ignore the reasons why Britain and France in particular led the intervention there. And we know that it's a colonial venture. I think that it suits the West to obviously prevent a government it doesn't like being in power, but I think they also thought that it might end the momentum of revolution. You've got a situation here now where perhaps other governments in Bahrain, perhaps in Saudi Arabia, are looking to Libya and think that the momentum that started so excitingly in Tunisia and then Egypt has now sort of come to an end. So that's one of the matters that I think is here in play in terms of Western involvement in Libya. Now, I think thanks for that, David from Wolverhampton.